Creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. ProXPN is the leading VPN service offering free accounts, excellent premium features, and an outstanding commitment to privacy and security online. Use the discount code WEEKLY and save 50% off for life. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email them at contact@netsparker.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. Some interesting stories for this week. An interesting one, Motherboard published an article about violating your warranty, how it's not really a violation. Did you guys read this one? Apparently, those little stickers that say, your warranty is voided if you remove this, that it's not really true. There's like a whole article about the ins and outs of the stickers and these agreements, which create the illusion, and I quote, that electronics are mysterious black boxes that shouldn't be opened by anyone who isn't authorized by the manufacturer. So if you are a warranty voider, which is most of us listening, you want to go read this article, as it's pretty fascinating. It gets in a lot of different aspects of it.
I void my warranties all the time. So.
That's right. There's a whole T-shirt, right? This is like, I void warranties. Like, maybe you're not really
kind of like the I
voiding
Hack Charities T-shirt.
Yeah, maybe you're not really voiding the warranty according to this article. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Jack, you wanted to talk about D-Link.
Yeah, just because we haven't talked about embedded systems nobody will update using shared code that's crap, and like, I don't know. For like 6 or 7 years, that was a weekly topic, and it's taken a couple of weeks off. It's by itself. It's just embedded devices that do things. I mean, it's like security cameras and routers and all sorts of stuff, right? And it's just code reuse, garbage code, things that nobody's ever going to update.
But it's it all goes back to the web server from Alpha Networks, which was the result of that epic hack by Craig Hefner.
Right.
What was it called? I should know this. It's in my class that I used to teach.
This is nothing new here.
Yeah.
This is
like if you search for D-Link exploit, like his post comes up.
Yeah. It's just we live with nightmares forever.
We do.
And that's it. We just live with nightmares forever.
It's the beautiful result of sharing code.
it's sharing code. And by the way, if you want that code that Paul wrote for that project today, it's on the website. Oh.
Yeah. Probably some vulnerabilities in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was several years ago, there was a vulnerability in D-Link routers. I believe it was D-Link. It must have been D-Link because they used the Alpha Networks thing that allowed for remote code execution. And it was traced back to the Alpha Networks, which is a Taiwanese company, I believe, that it was Joel's backdoor. That's what it was. Do you remember Joel's backdoor? It was, you set your user agent, and it was like Joel's backdoor backwards and then some numbers. Right. That's the whole D-Link exploit. It sounds like they still continue to use the web server from Alpha Networks because the Shodan search is for the web server in Alpha Networks. And the original vulnerability was found in the D-Link Wi-Fi camera, but it extends to 120 products. So they're still reusing crappy code.
No, not just reusing crappy code, reusing known crappy code
from the Taiwanese company Alpha Networks.
Wow.
That's
it reminds me years ago, I was installing some Thinnet Ethernet cards.
God, you're old.
Yeah, I know, right? But years ago.
Don't let the ring fall out.
Wait, that's ThickNet was the vampire clips.
No, not ThickNet. I was talking about the Thinnet stuff.
Was that vampire? Which one was vampire clips? That was ThinNet, right? You could clamp onto the net.
The twist clip, the twist coaxial
okay.
connector.
What
I'm
was the one
talking
with
about
vampire clips?
Vampires were Thicknet, right?
Were Thicknet, yeah.
They were
That's
the
what I
big
said.
ones, and
The
the
big
ones,
ones, yeah.
the ones that you couldn't, if you curved too tight, you didn't. The ring fell out of the token, and
the ring.
Correct. Like when you're punching down Ethernet and you put the punch down tool the wrong way and you just cut the cable.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Same
You've
kinda
done that
concept.
too, huh?
Yeah, well, I had to do some punch down today, and I was like,
We're all like-
wait, this is, oh, okay, that goes that way. Yes. Make sure you get that right.
yes. Use the right.
Oh, you've got. I love that. Anybody who's a geek at some point has purchased a punch down tool or acquired one, and keep it in that box of tools, which
Absolutely.
is very useful. But anyway, to finish the story really quick, I had 2 different vendors of Ethernet NIC, and I was installing the drivers, and this was back in the DOS days.
Oh,
Installing
I thought
the
this was
drivers-
recently. I thought you were doing some kind of project that used Thinnet recently, Job.
Oh no!
I was going to be
hell.
impressed. Like while you're
Oh,
like,
hell no. Install the drivers, and on both of the installations, the message came up: "Please wait, waiting."
oh boy.
So it was clearly a reused code for the installation, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
The exact same code, both different vendors of NIC. So
Well, we've talked
just
about
sort of
this
reminded me of that
before
story.
in embedded systems, whether it's network cards or whether it's wireless routers or cameras. People totally reuse code because it's kind of hard to write code in an embedded system because it goes back to like back in the day when you had, I don't know, 8 bytes of memory.
Yeah, how many
12 bytes of
developers?
memory.
How many
Yeah.
developers these days can write small footprint code?
Yeah.
I can.
Writing small, well, some can, like Joff, but it's hard to write a full functioning web server and have it fit in a firmware image that gets installed on 2 megs of flash. Now, you have 2 megabytes. You got 2 megabytes on a lot of these systems that have to include the bootloader, you know, the firmware, a file system, in the whole 9 yards. So that firmware is an all-encompassing term for all of that stuff. And the bootloader is separate, but you know, firmware is a kernel, a file system, and user land code, and fit all of that plus a bootloader on 2 megs of flash, and you've got a challenge. So writing a web server that lets you go in and change the SSID and do all that stuff that all of our embedded systems do today is challenging. Getting a platform that'll do that is challenging, so that's why they reuse code. That's
And it becomes even worse, right, for the RAM footprint. They got to maybe fit into 256K of RAM or 128K of RAM. And if you look at some of these frameworks that people are developing in today,
right.
the idea of fitting
usually you have more RAM than that. I mean, if you have 2 megs of flash, Joff, you probably have at least 4 to 8 megs of RAM in some of these modern systems. If you've got less than that, you're talking about a microcontroller.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they don't reuse code, but we talk microcontroller code where like it's just code, raw code running on the chip. Yeah, the problem exists there too. I agree.
Yeah, my point was it's not just a secondary storage. The problem is dealing with the RAM, because you know you talk about large framework development, and everybody expects you have gigs of RAM, and that's just not the case. And
no, well, I mean, you look at a D-Link Wi-Fi camera, you've got to run a kernel. And you've got to run wireless drivers inside of that RAM space. So the web server that's used to administer it has got to live in that space too. So yeah, it's got to be trimmed down.
Yeah, and people forget. It's kind of interesting. Not that I want to
Why don't
the old
you
guy,
know
but
what
I'm
make
going
them
to for a
smaller
minute.
is that they just leave the vulnerabilities out.
Yeah, that's right. No, but people do forget. I mean, I see habits in programmers today. And processing a file. This is a very elementary kind of concept, right? I want to process content from a file. Everybody does it. But if you see like a modern programmer, that is one that was born somewhere after about 1995, right? They want to glob the whole thing into memory because they have the resources to do it.
Right.
But back in the day, like the old guys are processing that file one line at a time because you didn't
You don't have those
the memory resources to do. So it's an interesting cultural shift, but yeah, I don't know. It is what it is.
I'm floored that it has to do with this Alpha Networks web server. I just can't believe that. Well, I can, but at the same time, I can't believe D-Link would go back and make that same mistake after the Joel's backdoor.
Well, whatever.
That sounds vaguely dirty when you say Joel's
It's
backdoor.
very dirty. In fact, the segment in my presentation in my class is called Inside Joel's Backdoor.
Wow. Was Joel aware of what was going on?
We don't know who Joel was. We don't know if Joel was like the English name of a Taiwanese developer. Like no one knows who Joel was. It's one of the most fascinating vulnerabilities. And I mean, we've been doing this is our 11th year. We've covered thousands of vulnerabilities on the show. It is by far one of the most fascinating vulnerabilities I've ever seen in my entire life. And the fact that and it's not this specific vulnerability, because what they're saying is that the alpha PD web server allowed us to easily exfiltrate files using some simple directory traversal and file type confusion issues. So they don't have a fix for this yet, which is interesting.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Matter.
So
it doesn't. It doesn't matter if they have a fix. It's D-Link gear. No one's will ever apply the fix.
And they shouldn't have to, is the point. When we talk on, Michael Santarcangelo and myself have done a couple of episodes of Startup Security Weekly, which will be hitting the feeds very soon. It'll be its own feed.
What's the problem we're trying to solve?
Yeah, well, no, not just that.
Since he couldn't make it tonight,
it needs
to be spat out my drink.
When we talk about startups in IoT, which is what it's called now, right? Back then it was called embedded devices, but in IoT, the firmware update process is extremely important. You shouldn't be delivering a device today that someone has to manually go update the firmware. It should be like Ring, for example, that just pushes firmware out. And that.
Well, you just eliminated 90% of the market.
Yeah, but that's that's where it's got to go, right? I don't know. Has anyone looked at this new Samsung? Or it's not new, but Samsung now has on the market a sub $5,000 refrigerator that has the camera inside, that has the whole. It looks like Windows embedded actually on the display panel, and you can leave notes for the family and stuff like that. Like these new products coming in the market, are these automatically updating firmware? How do I update the firmware in my refrigerator? Do I have to go in the back and plug a USB cable in?
So the upside of using Windows in some environments,
It's
not
auto
your
update.
refrigerator, but is that there are management mechanisms, right? And there is auto update. And if Microsoft was pushing patch code quality like they were, up until a couple of years ago, then that'd be a wonderful thing.
So you think the past 2 years is when Microsoft patch code quality has dropped off?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the decision to kill the trustworthy computing group. It's just an absolute coincidence that all of those people wandered off and their code quality turned to shit. It's just a coincidence. Correlation is not causation, except in this case where a bunch of people that held people's feet to the fire weren't there to hold people's feet to the fire. And the Windows Update team, that's an interesting conversation with somebody from Microsoft. The Windows Update team owns the responsibility for everything that goes out through Microsoft Update, but they don't write the code. So they, it's interesting.
So everybody says, I don't want to be on that team.
Yes, it is a team that has to be comfortable taking abuse. And if you're a Microsoft admin or have been, you can imagine the applications where the teams that run the software as well as the teams that develop it think they're special freaking snowflakes and don't test their code and ship it out into production and exchange what.
Wow, that's going to have interesting, interesting degenerative effects over time.
Right, but what's worse, taking your chance with Windows Update on Windows Embedded, or never being updated and having vulnerabilities forever. Oh, I'd like something. What's behind door number 3?
Oh,
decent code quality with reliable updates.
Along these lines, TP-Link
oh dear, this is hysterical.
So speaking of automatic updates are great, except when someone like TP-Link loses control over the configuration domain of all their routers. No, say it isn't so.
No way, they didn't.
They let the cert expire, and somebody pounced on it, and the cert I forget the URL. Or not the cert. They let the domain expire, and somebody pounced and grabbed it, and so the domain for TP-Link router config is available on the market. Last I saw, they were asking $2.5 million.
I was
Well,
going to
yeah,
say
because I mean, it's not even. I mean, there's no. To me, there's no good analogy for this, right? I mean, you could say that a major car manufacturer, basically, thank you, it wouldn't be the first time I ashed in my drink. A major car manufacturer lost like the master key. Like it's not even like that.
No,
if you
it's
could
just
compromise, I mean, how many TP-Link routers are out there?
I don't
Oh, here we go. The company sold 57.8 million routers.
You know, they.
You could, if you could,
Oh,
I mean, it's not just stealing 57 million cars. Compromising 57 million routers means you could compromise the traffic. Yeah.
Yes. What could you do with 55?
Put them out of business entirely.
So that's the. Yeah,
But
that's
the
crazy.
amount of vast
but
amount
they
of
don't-
information you
but
can get is
these
unprecedented.
people don't care about security. They make a great line of inexpensive web-managed switches.
There's one right here.
They
Too.
make
That's what we do with our TP-Link
yeah.
routers. You can't see it on camera, but there's one on set as a decoration.
And the brand new
I've got one too.
TP-Link web-managed switches, which are great because they do sort of do VLAN tagging, but nobody else seems to know how to handle the tags.
Can you get a switch, a tap span port?
They do. They can't call it a span, but they do mirror reliably, and they do rudimentary QoS and a few other things. And the only login method is HTTP. I've yet to figure out how to do secured login to these.
I was going to ask you a recommendation for a gigabit switch because we need to buy a new one here for the studio.
I have
Not
purchased
TP-Link, but
I've purchased a couple
maybe
of TP-Link,
TP-Link,
but they're insecure login.
eBay, Cisco.
But, you know, it's
yeah, because I have a Dualcomm gigabit tap that I bought. For
the
my purposes.
Dualcomm gear. I have a handful of their stuff because the USB powered stuff and
that's what I have.
the regenerating tap.
I plug it into an outlet on a UPS, and I plug the USB into the one from my tablet.
Right.
And that's how I power it, so it's on a UPS.
Right. I run those. They have the switch ones with one repeater port, and then they have the other one that's it's a multi-port repeater.
Yeah, I've got
use
the five. It mirrors one port and then gives you three ports.
Three switch ports.
Three switch ports. That's what I've got.
They have one that has different firmware where you basically have in and out, and then the other three, or if you put it on a tap, the other four.
Gotcha.
Mirror out, and that's great for like doing a IPS or IDS, or, IDS shootout or sniffer shootout or whatever, because you can stack them up all on one. They have some funky things. I don't know. What I use for stuff that is ancient Cisco Catalyst crap, but part of the reason I use that is because it's all horribly vulnerable because it's too old to be able to get an iOS update, and I don't have a contract anymore anyway.
So that's vulnerable too.
Oh, it's stunningly vulnerable. Management is HTTP.
Right.
If you're
but
dumb
it runs freaking rock solid.
Yeah,
though.
if you're dumb enough to turn on the web interface,
Oh, Jesus.
Cisco,
You
and then your choice is Telnet.
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
But you can mitigate most of the vulnerabilities in Cisco. This is a nice thing. You can mitigate most of the vulnerabilities just through decent configuration.
Very.
Yeah, that's true, Joff. That's true. Even if you don't have a support contract, you could.
It
You
is
could
true,
turn
but
off-
You
turn
can't.
off-
You can't mitigate all of them.
You can turn off a lot of stuff.
You
but
can turn
even
off
if you
web
don't-
and
but
SNMP.
the flip side of that, though, is I work at a vulnerability management company, so
when you scan your
I
network.
like having red and orange and purple things on the network. It's sadly easy to
So
have
that's
those.
so it's interesting that the TP-Link stuff works for you, but contains vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And people probably still buy it and are
They're
oblivious.
it doesn't click that they're going to an HTTP site, and it's if they fixed that, if they fixed the authentication, I'd feel a whole lot better about recommending it to people because it's really handy to be able to mirror a port.
Yeah.
It's really handy to say the uplink port and the one that I put the camera on get high QoS, and it's not very adjustable. Supposedly it'll take DSCP tagging and those things, but right, that's the right acronym, right? QoS, DSCP, disk.
Anyway, code point. That's right.
Right.
was
But I
deferring
just
to
used
Joff
a really
on that.
dumb. I just used some really dumb basic settings on it, and it works well in my lab environment. It works really well for me but I'm uncomfortable recommending them because the authentication is such a fundamental failure. And it's not just that the authentication is a fundamental failure, it's that it's such a fundamental failure. I wonder what other dumb shit they've done, and not keeping ownership of the domain used to configure 57 million routers is probably not making their case any stronger.
Yeah.
I've heard some of the HP switches are not bad.
Oh,
Paul.
I used to love those back when I worked for a living, back when they were ProCurve.
ProCurve, yeah.
Yeah, the Pro
Switching gears, WikiLeaks was downed in a hacker feud. Did you follow this one, Jack? You follow some of the hacker feuds. I know you do.
I do. I checked out for a while. Yeah, I checked out for the past 10 days or so. I reached saturation point.
Well, apparently the groups are anonymous and
whatever that means now.
Yeah,
yes.
Or at least the Your Anon News part of Anonymous and the nefarious Our Mine, which I haven't heard of that one yet, to be honest with you. But apparently Our Mine also took down Google and Facebook attacks as well. This beef stretches back to 2015, and the Our Mine faction is publicly doxing Anonymous and all kinds of things, and WikiLeaks went down.
Oh, wow.
Anyway.
Wow. Hacker feud. Feuders will be feuding.
For whatever newsworthy that is. It's about as newsworthy as the FBI director saying that the Clinton emails weren't criminal, they were just careless. Liz, you're laughing. Come on, weigh in on this story. Liz Cassell is still here with us. You were laughing and shaking your head. You work in the beltway, as it were.
This whole thing just makes me really, really sad. The political climate this year.
Oh, no kidding.
It's terrible.
You're not the only one.
So sad.
I
keep wanting to make comments about the whole Brexit thing, and I have a couple of friends, but it's like every time I comment, I usually preface or suffix my comment with, but then again, we're about to elect one of two people that we hate, and we hate them both.
Yeah.
Have you seen the show? I mean, not to get political, but I thought this was a funny joke by a 13-year-old that was on America's Got Talent, and she said, "Hey, I'm 13, and you're trusting me babysitting your kids." And she's like, "The only qualification I have is that I was a baby once." That's like saying, "Hey, I had a reality show once, and now I want to be your president."
Oh.
From a 13-year-old girl, that is some of the most brilliant comedy.
Nice.
Regardless of where you fall in the political climate,
Yeah.
that's funny. That's funny.
That is hysterical.
I assume that the comedians who only are in it for material might be leaning Trump, but man, the comic gold is, it doesn't matter. Comedy wins.
Comedy wins. The whole email debacle.
Everybody else loses. Comedy wins. Yeah, I mean, our first Bill Clinton is first lady. I'd like to see him in that blue dress. Yeah, I mean, they're just, I don't know where. There's so many places to go with this.
Just
So
Bill Clinton as the first lady in and of itself is just funny. Like, it's just you're already laughing before the joke is delivered. And like I said, regardless of where you fall in the political, it doesn't matter. Politics aside, that shit's funny.
I did send a Brexit email today. My friend and a colleague and associate, DigiNinja, lives in the UK.
Yes.
And I said, hey, Robin. I said, I'd like to come over and visit because Brexit just made the beer cheaper.
Yes, that's what
Wait, does Brexit make Scotch cheaper? Because Scotch is skyrocketing in cost.
Only briefly until they become a sovereign nation.
Yeah, I was about to say till Scotland actually says.
Well, it's
Oh,
funny.
wait, no. So Scott, hold on. So no, yeah. So does that affect the price? That doesn't affect the price of Scotch at all.
Yeah, for now it does because it's British pounds. But Scotland prints their own money.
Mm-hmm.
They are GBP is pound sterling, but they print their own money. They've got like their banks on them, and I saved a £10 note because it's got the
A bottle of scotch on
No,
it?
it's got the Glenfinnian viaduct on it, and we did the Harry Potter steam train.
Yeah.
It's not really the Harry Potter train, but some of the cars are. And went over the big long viaduct that's you see in the Hogwarts Express, all those shots. So we went over that, but anyway, the part of the reason that Scotland voted to stay in the UK in the last referendum was because of the economic stability and the pound and not having to negotiate to join the EU. Scotland is talking about splitting. Whether or not that really happens, who knows?
Oh, I see.
The other one is there's now a movement. Who knows if it'll go anywhere for Irish reunification, because Northern Ireland is worried about what happens if they have to put the walls back up and do customs. But it was interesting.
Lord, what an interesting time.
I was there for 2 weeks. Left on Saturday. Thursday was the vote, so 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it'll be surprisingly close, but it's clear that this thing's not going to work. And then in retrospect, it's like I spent 6 days in Scotland and 8 days in London. Oh, talk about a sample bias.
Yeah.
Right? It's
That's
like,
right.
there's the perfect example of sample bias. I went to London, which was strongly stay, and Scotland, which was strongly stay. And did not, didn't get off the trains in the rural areas of the Western.
Right.
And,
you didn't visit the hinterlands.
in their Rust Belt and things like that, where it went the other way. But it's I don't know. It's interesting to watch them as they all run away from the leadership roles. Everybody that was in the leadership roles has run away. I wouldn't be
jumping off the ship.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd be unhappy back to that if a bunch of people who want to be our leaders would run away.
Well, then there's that, of course.
Just run away.
Speaking of, hold on.
I'll tell you what, we'll give you all a new reality show. Just stop running for president.
So speaking of running away, we could go so many places with that. Symantec's not going to fix the catastrophic flaw that we talked about last week in the product until mid-July, which is, in my opinion, shameful.
Wait, no. You've got your own product. We got to stop. Some of them got fixed quickly. Some are getting fixed more slowly. Some, the report happened late April, early May. So that's under 90 days to ship. And we're talking about a product line, a product category, and a company which have both pushed out updates which have wiped out customers' computers. So there is an argument to be made for QA.
But there's an argument to be made that if your system's wiped out, it's more secure than if it was running software.
True,
I'm just
but
saying.
Nobody cares. So
Nobody cares.
Yeah. They just want their computer to work. They don't care how it's owned.
No, I agree.
I mean, but it's a long, complicated conversation. I think that
We have no time for long, complicated conversations.
There's a whole conversation about when you install software to make your system more secure and it makes it less secure. But that's
Let's go back to the judicial system, because that's always a fun place to go, and talk about news that's not news. The Celebgate hacker Celebgate nudes hacker even pleads
another
guilty.
one pled guilty. Yep.
Okay, so who cares? Whatever.
That was.
If you hack into people's stuff, you might get prosecuted.
Yeah, especially if you hack into rich, powerful, famous people's stuff and put their junk on the internet.
That's true. Well, we all appreciate.
You're really kind of asking for it, aren't you?
Well, we all appreciate that. I mean, while we all think that's deplorable,
Deplorable.
That's not even.
We
really
appreciate that contribution. I mean, we think.
What did they? Celebgate. That's not what it was called.
What
when
was
it happened.
Oh, it's the fappening.
Right.
It's the fappening.
So, but yeah, now they're right.
Anyway, the Silent Circle kills their warrant Canary, which is kind of interesting.
Silent Circle. That's the least interesting thing that's come out of them, and they're tied up in legal battles over Black Phone, the number that were supposed to be built and shipped, and the hardware manufacturer, and they've lost
That's
some key
too bad.
players.
They did. They lost Callus, and
they're struggling. They say they're going to bounce back, but from the time they launched until now, even as an Android user, if you're concerned about security, you should just probably be on iOS and use WhatsApp and
Or get a Nexus 6P like I did. It's the next best thing to iOS. Get
Yeah,
a
I don't
6P and get the updates as soon as you can.
get the updates.
That's what I did.
And
That's
I mean, I wanted the black phone. I think they make awesome stuff. I think their software is awesome. Being able to create those kind of virtual environments on your phone,
Right.
I think is brilliant. I think everyone should be using it. But
the underlying
Is there a bug
did you
there?
grab that? Did you grab that the crypto vulnerability in Android?
no. Oh, I saw that. I didn't put it in.
So there are issues. So what we do is wait for John Callis to be back at Apple for another year and a half, and then we'll know the secure enclaves are really secure, and
Yeah.
and then maybe I'll give up on Android, even though I finally got the stupid new Google Map update where I can add a stop on Google Maps app on my phone.
I gotta tell you, I'm about to go Paul's direction as well because I'm just sick of the crapware coming down from.
It is, dude. Samsung.
You know, it's just annoying as hell.
Samsung makes some pretty cool hardware, but their crapware is so crappy, dude. And that's one of the reasons why I switched to Google for both my tablet and I had a Samsung tablet and I still have a Samsung tablet and phone. I switched to Google because I wanted the updates and I wanted more control.
Well, the big one for me is more control. I mean, for Samsung or mobile incumbent provider or both to be continually just pushing crapware at my device just irritates the living crap out of
You're
me.
putting software on my device that I can't remove.
That you
I don't
cannot
like that.
remove.
No, I don't
mean,
like that.
That trend has got to stop. That is so ridiculous.
And that's one of the reasons why I like Black Phone as well. With more control of your device and containers for all your applications was there.
If I could find a
think it's great.
keyboard that I didn't hate for iOS, and if it supported the multi-pane, because since I use phablets, I want to have two windows. I spend a lot of time in the car. It's great to have the maps going. I don't want to follow the map, but I want when it says, "Hey, there's a faster route," I want to know if they're trying to like send me someplace.
Can you
stupid.
customize your keyboard in iOS? Can you put a new
Yeah,
app?
you can put in other ones. I just haven't found ones that are as good as the default keyboard on my Note 4.
The default one on Android is pretty good. I got a third-party
the
one.
swipey. I've used the
I got a
swipey
third-party
ones.
one. I forget what it's called on Android.
Yeah.
Everyone said you should use, but I'm not a big fan. I like its suggestions for when I type, but actual typing, it comes out like gibberish when I type on it. Like the default Android one, I can type better on, but it doesn't make the suggestions as well.
yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't know. Whatever that's worth on security podcasts.
Find what works for you.
That's it. Palo Alto does a bug bounty, whatever. Yeah, not too much else. Liz, were there any news stories? I know you and your day job, you follow security news stories. Were there any ones that jumped out at you this week?
Oh gosh, this week I don't know if anything really jumped out as being crazy that you guys didn't already cover.
Everyone's getting ready for Black Hat, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Rich,
it's been pretty
stuff.
quiet.
Did you guys cover last week the? It's not just Lenovo. The Intel EFI bug.
Oh yeah, nasty BIOS bug slugs
Yeah.
Gigabyte.
Is that it?
That's the one I had. Hold on, I did have one about a BIOS bug. Gigabyte has been swept into the turmoil surrounding low-level security vulnerabilities that allow attackers to kill flash protection, secure boot, and tamper with firmware on PCs. So this is Gigabyte, the motherboard manufacturer, not necessarily Intel.
It's way beyond them. If it's the same one, it's not, and it's not BIOS. It's EFI, UEFI.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
UEFI.
UEFI.
Correct.
And it's ugly, and it first was like, more crap from Lenovo, and then they looked, and it came from...
Yeah, thanks to a flaw in the system's SMN runtime RT UEFI driver.
Right, which comes from Intel, but Intel didn't write it, a third party, fourth party, fifth party,
in
whatever we're up
in
to.
Taiwan. Not to pick on Taiwan, but...
Alpha Web Server...
The EUFI wing of Alpha Networks in Taiwan wrote it. There we go. We got it full. We come full circle.
That only lets you lay waste to secure boot. Shit. Oops. God.
And now we have officially flown right off the cliff.
Right off the cliff. Well, that link is in there in the show notes. I want to thank our special guest, Liz Gassell, for joining us from Tenable Network Security for our sponsored interview for this week. Jack and Joff, of course, thank you very much for joining us. It was fun as always. Again, if you have feedback for the show, psw@securityweekly.com. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see everyone next week. Jack, take us out.
Over and out.
Out.